Rebecca, also known as Bex. I've been tattooing about 4.5 years. I kind of focus on watercolor and a sort of similar brushstroke style. Also kind of what I call mixed media, where it'll be some kind of realistic stuff mixed with some kind of like more watercolory, ink splashy stuff. I had kind of a slightly different entrance to the field that a lot of people did because I'd been like a freelance illustrator for a while and I had a series of art pieces that were very popular. So once I started tattooing, I already had a lot of people that knew my art that wanted to come and get tattooed by me. Before I went to tattoo school, I did a lot of watercolor art, and even the kind that was sort of already becoming popular in the tattoo world. It just was sort of very similar. And so when I went to talk to Kat at Point of View about coming to school there, she looked through my portfolio and she's just told me, she's like, yeah, you need to learn watercolor style tattooing. And I was like, great, I can do that. I always start with a canvas that is the body part that I'm going to be tattooing. And then I'll draw just kind of tracings of those shapes. Because that's the most important thing to me in a tattoo, is that it like feels seamlessly integrated with the body. And then from there, I'll just kind of do rough sketches of like, well, what object, you know, I do a lot of custom work, so I'll take stuff from their requests. I'll say like, okay, what of those objects will fit best in this curve, and what object will fit best, you know, here's the little accents. And then from there, it's just a matter of refinement and figure out color. But one of the reasons I use a lot of like kind of swirls and ribbons and things in my tattoos is because it helps to enhance that curve, that movement of the body, when I can just draw a little bit extra something that kind of follows that curve.
I'm gonna ask you to introduce yourself, your style, and then anything about you.
Okay, I'm Rebecca, also known as Bex. I've been tattooing about 4.5 years. I kind of focus on watercolor and a sort of similar like brushstroke style. Also kind of what I call mixed media, where it'll be some kind of realistic stuff mixed with some kind of like more watercolory, ink splashy stuff. Other things about me, I was born in France, and that's where the oak iris name comes from. The oak is for Oregon and the iris is for France. I'm an artist full-time. Before tattooing, I've been an artist my whole life, done freelance illustration, and tattooing is kind of the next thing.
Mm-hmm. So when did you start to develop an interest in art?
As long as I can remember, I've been drawing. I remember being maybe 4 or 5 years old. My sister was showing me how to draw like faces and horses. She had this style of drawing horses that she did, and I would take these stacks of printer paper and like just go through and draw horses and draw faces, and then moving on to drawing everything that was around me. And I would just have like piles and piles of drawings. And I studied art in college, and then I went to grad school, got a MFA in graphic design, and I've been pretty much, except for like a short time in grad school where I got a little distant, I've been drawing and painting all my spare time for my whole life pretty much.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And yeah.
Awesome. And then, so when did you decide, or like what were the deciding factors in moving your arts from all the other mediums into tattooing? Like what made you take that leap?
Yeah, so I had a friend, Whiteseth of Elm Pixie Tattoos. Before I was a tattooer, I got to be friends with them, and they said, hey, you're an artist, I'm looking for a studio, would you want to split it? I'll tattoo on one side and you can draw and do your art on the other side. And I said, oh, that sounds great. So we moved into a studio together, and I would overhear them like talking to their clients and, you know, talking about designs and doing the whole process, and they would let me come and like watch, and every once in a while they would ask me to draw something for them to tattoo because it would be a style that was like a little bit different from theirs. And so after that I was just like, wow, this is really fun. It's cool to see people all the time and try to design things that work with the body, and I was just smitten. I've always loved body art but just never thought I could do it. And that was when I was like, okay, this is achievable. And so yeah, Em helped me through tattoo school and kind of taught me a bunch while we were still working together, and then I decided to open up my own studio.
Nice. So you took the pathway of tattoo school. Do you feel like there's any benefits between tattoo school versus a regular apprenticeship? Because it sounds like you also had some help from a artist to guide you along the way.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a challenging question because I've heard so much about like mentorships and apprenticeships being kind of abusive, like where they just make you work and don't actually, like, just make you like clean, but you don't actually get to learn from them. So I feel like since there's no like straightforward way to like track that kind of thing, it makes me nervous, the idea of only doing that. So I kind of like how a lot of people do it here, where they'll do the tattoo school to learn all the basics, the cleaning, everything like that, and then they'll you know, go find an artist that will teach them so they can kind of work side by side. So that's basically what I wanted to do, is like go to school, get all the basics, and then learn like more of the sort of artistic and detail techniques from them.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when do you feel like you were able to, like, after you graduated, break into the industry, and what do you feel are like the key skills needed for that success to happen?
Yeah, I had kind of a slightly different entrance to the field that a lot of people did, because I'd been like a freelance illustrator for a while, and I had like a series of art pieces that were very popular. So once I started tattooing, I already had like a lot of people that knew my art that wanted to come and get tattooed by me. So I sort of already had a pretty good business going, like when I first started. But it probably took me another year after graduating before I really felt like I understood a lot of the stuff that they tried to teach in school but didn't quite get through. So I think, you know, obviously you have to have some art skills. Like anybody can trace something, but if you trace something with like skill and, you know, vision, it comes out a lot more real and beautiful and dimensional. So I think, you know, definitely some art skills, and then, you know, they did a really great job at school of teaching us all of the hygiene and sanitation stuff, but I felt like, you know, people need to learn more of the different kinds of ways of using the tools, because we were sort of taught, here's how to line, here's how to pat color, here's how to shade, and I wanted to know more. I wanted more experience with that. So I think like somebody can sit down with like some fake skin or something and just try every sort of use of the needle. I think that that would be really beneficial to everybody.
So do you feel like a lot of that stuff that you learned probably isn't as teachable, or like that you have to learn later on?
I think it's definitely teachable. It's just that because tattoo school is relatively short, like I was through it in like 6 months, I think they don't have the opportunity, like you have to get kind of good at the basics that they teach you before you can understand the rest. So I sort of think it would be really cool if there was some sort of continuing education for that, where, you know, you could all get together with an expert and they can teach you kind of the next level of things. And ultimately it just takes a lot of practice. So, you know, I think we should all be kind of working on that in our free time for at least the first few years, working on like fake skin and fruit and stuff to learn the different ways that they couldn't teach us, and then get together with an expert so they can explain to you what you've sort of been learning on your own to make sure you understand it.
That makes sense.
So yeah, it's hard to do it in that 360 hours we have for school.
Yeah, it's a really short time.
Yeah.
Realistically, yeah. So you went to art school before this. Do you feel, well, you already said that helped you get like a leg up in tattooing, but do you feel like now you need stuff to continue growing as an artist, or like going back to take classes for art or for anything else to be able to further your art career?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't just focus on learning more about tattooing for art, although there are some great classes online at like domestica.com for learning specific tattoo styles and stuff. I love still taking those. I also take other kinds of art classes because I feel like for me a well-rounded art education is really valuable. So there's this organization called Smart School that has like these professional illustrators and really, you know, amazingly skilled and talented people that will take a small group and actually mentor them on some kind of illustration that they want to do for 17 weeks or something. It's really amazing. And then also I do like oil painting workshops. Just anything that can get me working more with color, with like handwork, steadiness, anything like that, I always think it's valuable. I don't think I'll ever stop taking classes for that.
Yeah, because when I was here, I remember you were taking a lot of, I don't know if it was PCC or what it was, but you were taking like seminars where you had to like not tattoo for a little while to
so that was probably the Smart School classes, because they are really intensive, and You learn so much, but it was a little bit interrupting, actual work. But I also took some class at PCC because of, for basically the continuing education requirements, I took like a drawing class at PCC that was a little bit less valuable because it was aimed just at kind of more beginners, but still, anything you can like pick up any skills from.
How did you balance that time at Smart School with still being able to have enough time to tattoo? I know a lot of people, this is like their main source of income, so taking a break like that isn't as feasible.
Yeah, I think if I hadn't had the privilege of having a little extra money coming in from my husband, it certainly would have been much more difficult, because I was able, to take off of like a week here and there to work on other projects and stuff. And I know that's not available to everyone, but there's so many classes that are not that time intensive. So like the domestica classes, you can just watch them in your spare time. And that's probably what I would recommend to people who, can't fit something really intensive in, because you can learn, so much even from their little like 3 hours of videos. So I think you kind of just have to look at your circumstances and what kind of time you can afford.
Okay, that makes sense. I've taken a few on there that are beneficial, but then it's like hard to find. Just finding the time.
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
Like the hard part, yeah.
It's still a lot of time in watching the videos and things. And I mean, the nice thing about them is that those videos, they're not live, so you can watch them like in between, school or work or whatever. But it's still like, it takes you a lot longer to watch one series of videos than if you weren't working. So yeah. I just say, try to fit it in where you can.
Okay. And then you have a very specific style of tattooing. It's very illustrative, and even when you were describing it, you picked from different types of media. What landed you on that style, and like what are your most important inspirations for it?
Yeah, so before I went to tattoo school, I did a lot of watercolor art, and even the kind that was sort of already becoming popular in the tattoo world. It just was sort of very similar. And so when I went to talk to Kat at Point of View about coming to school there, she looked through my portfolio and she's just told me, she's like, yeah, you need to learn watercolor style tattooing. And I was like, great, I know watercolor, I can do that. So she really helped, direct me in that way. So I knew I was going to be doing watercolor. And then I started seeing some artists like Kel Tate and Corvallis and other people whose names are slipping my mind, but there are a few other artists out there that use kind of that similar, like, as if you're making a collage of like natural elements or something, and ink and whatever on paper. And it just is so stunning, kind of thinking about what if I was actually painting on your body? What if I actually did a brush stroke of ink, And I just started to really love that aesthetic. Like Kel Tate will actually go and make like stamps of flowers and leaves and stuff, and then use those stamps in her designs. So it's really directly taking from the real physical kind of art world, and that's what really draws me to that. It's this beautiful integration of physical media and tattooing.
Kel Tate is a tattoo artist.
She's a tattoo artist that focuses. She doesn't call it watercolor, but I think some people would, because it's got that sort of painterly thing. But yeah, she's an artist down in Corvallis that just does work like that.
Are they the ones that did your side piece there?
Yeah, so she did this bird and this bird. And so you can see, I don't know if the camera can catch this, but she'll do these kind of stampy, ink-like things combined with this sort of very realistic bird.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, and I find that mix of styles that's all still very painterly and like something you might produce on paper, I find it just so intriguing. And so she's probably one of my biggest influences. But there are definitely others out there, like Hunmin Ji over at Raymond Forest here in Portland, and Shelley Gray at Equinox in Gresham. Like a lot of people that do that similar kind of work that have been very inspiring to me.
Awesome. When you go about designing your tattoos, how would you describe your methodology? So like, what is the most important order of events that has to happen in order to create such a masterful piece?
So I always start with either a photo of the client, or I have some stamps that are body parts. I always start with a vision of canvas that is the body part that I'm going to be tattooing. So, you know, the stamps, I'll just do like, okay, here's a right arm, you know, or here's my client's chest, or things like that. So that the first thing I can do is inspect the way the body flows, the way the muscles are coming together, things like that, and then I'll draw just kind of tracings of those shapes. Because that's the most important thing to me in a tattoo, is that it like feels seamlessly integrated with the body. I know a lot of people love like sticker tattoos, and that's really cool too, but for me it's very much capturing that flow of muscles and form. And then from there I'll just kind of do rough sketches of like, well, what object, you know, I do a lot of custom work, so I'll take stuff from their requests and I'll say like, okay, what of those objects will fit best in this curve, and what object will fit best, you know, here's the little accents. And I'll just sort of do a bunch of sketches trying to fit the required objects or the preferred objects into that flow. And then from there it's just a matter of refinement and, you know, color, figure out color and stuff. But one of the reasons I use a lot of like kind of swirls and ribbons and things in my tattoos is because it helps to enhance that curve, that movement of the body, when I can just draw a little bit extra something that kind of follows that curve.
Yeah, I have heard a lot of your clients talk about the movement in your tattoos, so I could definitely see it from just clients saying it, but also seeing it in your tattoos. So, what is your favorite subject to tattoo, and do you have a specific body part you like to tattoo the most?
Well, my favorite subject is always animals, especially birds. I love how birds already are kind of an interesting shape, but all animals, like, I just love animals, and I love drawing them from way back, and I feel like they're really interesting tattoo subject because they can, you know, express a lot of sort of archetypes and emotions and stuff just through the animal. And then, what was the other question?
Area that you like to tattoo the most.
Yeah. Well, I really like it when it's something pretty accessible so that I can really just treat it like a canvas. I get a little like challenged when it's something that I have to do a lot of weird stretching and angling and stuff. So it's like when I can just do like a thigh or even a forearm where it can just kind of be flat and I can just draw right on it, I love that because it just lets me think about following the form, doing, you know, tight tattooing, and not worrying about if the client is comfortable or if they can twist that way or reaching the right spot, things like that.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, different to that, what are the most challenging subjects that you've done, such as the location of the body or actual subject matter that you've done? And what are some unique challenges that came from those, and how did you overcome them?
I would say the most interesting and challenging part of the body I've ever tattooed was right in the back of the heel over the Achilles tendon, because first of all it's very painful for the client, so you kind of have to like be prepared for them to maybe twitch or, you know, tap out or things like that. And then it's also very textured, and the thing about tattoos, if folks don't know this, is that the more textured the skin is, the harder it is to get that, you know, needle in all of the spaces evenly. So you kind of have to just go super slow and stretch out the skin as much as you can. And yeah, it was a super challenge. It was pretty early in my career too, so I didn't have all that toolbox of tricks. So it was a challenging one, but it did come out pretty good. I don't know how it's aged. I wish that the client would come back and let me touch it up because I'm sure it needs it. But yeah, that was like kind of the biggest challenge I remember facing. And then for me, things like, I still haven't figured out good ways to get, you know, all the parts of the arm, like when someone wants a tattoo right here, how do you position them so that they can breathe and you can also work? So there's just a lot of little things like that that are not necessarily difficult to tattoo in themselves, but just finding a way to access it naturally. So I'm not drawing like this, and they're also sitting in a way that works for them.
So finding a way for them to be comfortable, but also you to have a workable canvas to tattoo on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every once in a while I'll find myself like working, you know, somebody will have an arm out or a leg out, and I'll be kind of working upside down, and of course the ink doesn't flow very well when your machine is upside down. So like I had to figure out, okay, now that we've done this part, we have to rearrange you to do this part.
I'm really bad at that also. I didn't even think of that, like ink flowing the wrong direction when it's like upside down, because I'll literally just work on it, and then usually it's the client that says, do you want me to move?
Yeah.
And I'm like, actually, yes, that would be so much better.
Yeah, it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out that the reason my ink wasn't flowing was because it was upside down. It's like, oh yeah, gravity exists.
Yeah, that's so funny. I'm gonna check if this is recording. Yes, okay. So you have your own shop. Can you explain how you got here, and then what are some unique challenges with opening a shop that you didn't know were gonna happen?
Yeah, well, one thing I would just say from the beginning is that if I had sort of understood how much I wasn't going to learn at school, how much that just required like somebody watching over you as you work, I probably would have waited a little while to open the shop. I opened it, I kind of had started planning it while I was in school, and I think I stayed a little bit with working with them, but I think it would have been nice to work with more artists first. So I decided, well, at least I'll try to invite in as many artists as I wanted, but that was challenging too, especially because I opened it right before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'd say that the challenges are like all the kind of bureaucratic stuff you have to deal with in a city. That's the first thing. Like, there were so many different kinds of permits and like fees, and I had to spend hours and hours on the phone with insurance companies and just things like that. All this like stupid bureaucratic stuff that's important, some of it, but is also just sort of like, really? That was probably my biggest challenge. And then the next challenge came with just, once I did have a bunch of artists in here, trying to figure out how to manage the shop and tattoo myself, tattoo on my own job and afford everything. You know, I inherited some money from when my grandmother died, and that was how I opened the shop. But, you have to keep going with that, and we were operating at such a thin margin that I wasn't getting any kind of compensation for the labor I did around the shop.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been one of my biggest challenges, is trying to figure out, how to make it fair for everyone. Because I do try, I charge myself the same as I charge everyone else. I give 40% of my tattoo income to the shop, and I try to be very transparent about all of the expenses and everything. So I'm not here making this huge profit that covers my labor. So trying to find that happy place where we're all productive and the shop can still grow. I've been really lucky. I've had some artists that work so hard to help make the shop function, and so it's not just on my shoulders, but it's a big challenge.
So you feel in the very beginning that it's beneficial to go to a shop where there's other more experienced artists that you could learn from, and then take the step into possibly owning your own shop.
Yeah, that's what I think I recommend to people, because as soon as I was starting to open the shop, people started telling me that's what they were doing, other recently graduated artists, and I was like, I could have done that and learned so much more with help. I've been able to learn a lot on my own, but it would have been so much better with somebody looking over my shoulder and correcting my mistakes.
And then the balancing between being able to tattoo and manage a shop. How do you do that? That sounds really difficult. Yeah,
it is really difficult. I'm pretty much working 24/7. I kind of can take Sundays off sometimes, but most of the time, I'm either drawing for that week, since I do so many customs, or tattooing, or I'm keeping track of the expiration dates on all the inks. I'm managing cleaning of the shop. Although thankfully Riley, one of the artists here, does tons of cleaning for us and organizing and inventory. But yeah, pretty much I never stop working, and having someone like that helps out for no explicit reward has been amazing. But yeah, I try not to have to go running around buying supplies. I order a lot of stuff so that I save some time for that. And again, I'm really lucky that I have some sort of background financial stuff, so I don't have to worry too much about if I mess up, we're gonna have to close today or something like that. So that helps.
Yes. And are there any tips or advice, other than the ones that we've mentioned already, that you would give to an artist who's either starting their career or is already deep in their career?
Number one question I always tell people when they're thinking about going to tattoo school is to ask questions. If I had been more vocal when I was training about asking about things that I was struggling with, I think I would have gotten amazing answers that were extremely helpful. But I just sort of sat there and let it come to me. I recommend people be proactive. Seek out learning, seek out teachers. Don't be afraid to ask people for help. The worst they can say is no. And then the other thing is just draw. Yeah, and also one thing I learned early in my art learning is to spend more time looking than you spend drawing. And I think that's actually a really important thing that a lot of people don't think about. You know, if you're drawing an apple and you're just like, stem, I'm done, then you're drawing just the archetypal apple. You're not actually seeing all of the different kinds of colors that are in there and the way the light is reflecting and what happens when the light interacts with the color of the apple and things like that. So whenever you're drawing, look, even if you're not doing realism, you can capture so many nuances of things if you spend more time looking than you spend drawing, at least at the beginning of your artistic journey.
Awesome. Those were all the questions.
Great.
Awesome. And then